The river looks a little bit different this morning. It's always different every day, but not sure if you can pick that up. But it looks like there's like a flotsam. It's I don't know if it's debris from the trees or if it's like air bubbles or something. Uh, but it looks great. Looks amazing. I mean, that's my vantage point. And speaking of vantage points, I was thinking about getting those meta glasses a little bit more. I think I'm just going to order some. I think they come in two main. There's the Wayfarers and something else, but I think I'm just going to order some and give them a try because it's definitely impacting my experience, kind of holding this camera. It's not like massively destroying it or anything, but it's definitely impacting how the ducks interact with me. Normally they'd just be straight over to me, whereas now it takes them a little while. And not so many will actually sort of come and directly feed from me. Come on, is anyone coming? Anybody? Mm. The jackdaws are definitely getting a lot more relaxed around me. It just takes time. Just I think it just takes time with any wild animal to gain their trust. I mean, I don't know that. Um, it's a theory, but I have a bit of evidence with that. I mean, my experience down here took the ducks a long while to trust me and to come and hand feed. Um, but over a period of time, over a period of sitting here for about 6 to 12 months, the ducks, the swans, which I don't think we have anymore, but the ducks, the swans, the rats, would all come and hand feed from me. Um, when I first moved to this town, there was I woke up, and the morning I woke up, I looked out of my bedroom window, and there was a deer outside. And fairly shortly after that, a pheasant started coming around, and I used to feed it, and I would leave my front door open for it. And gradually, over a period of time, it would start actually like knocking on my window, like with its beak. If it was hungry, it would literally like knock on my door, and I'd have to go out and feed it. But over a longer period of time, it just kind of hung around. And I never really had the idea of trying to feed it or anything. So I'm not sure if that would have if that relationship would have continued to grow. But I moved after about a year there, further into town. But lots more birds were starting to come around, and I hear lots of stories of that, of people befriending the wild birds in their garden. So given that, my sort of I think my working theory, which I think is probably a fairly good one, is that most animals can be befriended. Most wild animals can be befriended. Given if you give them the right energy and they see you frequently enough. Anyway, let's see if we can get some feeding going on here. Here comes Mana. So beautiful. Look at that. It's almost just silhouetted. They're coming in. Look, these chicks have got no fear. And if you notice, like the males don't really mess with them. Like sometimes the females will, sometimes other females will peck at one of those ducks, but the little chicks will have a go back. They'll actually fight back at them. Um, but yeah, you'll see that probably. Well, I don't know, but you'll probably see that the males there's a rat. Um, I wonder how the rats interact with the ducks. I wonder if the ducklings like or dislike them. But the ducks themselves won't bother with the rats really, on whether on the land or in the water. If they do, if they give them a peck, then the rat will jump up and bite them back. And I think if that went the distance, the rats would probably win. So I don't know. That's a guess. I'm just thinking. Yeah, I think they would. I think they would. Mhm. So funny that I had this mindset of like who would win in a deadly fight. This animal. I wonder if that reflects where my mindset's competitive. Yeah, I think the those pellets are still too big for the ducklings. They can take the seed, but the problem with the seed is it quickly sinks to the bottom. So like every bit I throw in, they're only going to get one little piece. So I got to throw them in like real small individual amounts. Like maybe that amount or so. Mhm. Some woman is asking a man to take a photo of her with her dog in the street. People are so cute. Oh wow, she's getting different pictures in different positions. I'm not gonna show you guys, but she's coming down to get a picture of her and her dog next to the boat. People are so weird. People are so strange. So that lady, I'm sure she kind of lives around here. So it's not like she's never been around the river or the boat or anything. Was that a was it a conversation starter? Is that what that was? But yeah, considering how territorial and hierarchical the ducks are, especially the males, you would think they would try and get rid of the ducklings, especially if they're males. Yeah, you see the rat just kind of like swing amongst the ducks. The ducklings seem slightly more interested in it, but nobody's that bothered. And I mean, why would they? It's not like, not like us. We don't see something like that, and we're kind of like, oh wow, have you seen that? They've probably seen it 100 times. Yeah, that's all it is. The more often you see something, the more used to it you get. And that's interesting because I was kind of thinking about this morning because I was thinking about, like, I tend to put a movie on to fall asleep. I wish I could just fall asleep without one and just have one of these sort of really nice bedtime routines and stuff. But I kind of need a movie or something on in the background to fall asleep to. I set my timer on my TV and I just fall asleep. Sometimes within seconds of putting the movie on, sometimes, but half an hour or so, but not long. Like once I kind of put on uh, that sort of, I might watch a movie before bed, but once I put on that final movie to kind of fall asleep to, I'm falling asleep quickly, and I'll put the timer on for, I don't know, 90 minutes or something. Um, and I was kind of realizing this morning, like, I'm probably taking that whole movie in, even though I'm asleep. I'm kind of hearing that because if ever you've had a movie on and you wake up and if there's like a dark bit in the movie or something, sometimes it will wake you up and you'll be having like a bit of a nightmare around the darkness of that part of the movie or something. But it was making me think that, you know, like during my sleep, I'm kind of taking in everything that's in that movie or that series. And it made me think about like patterns and conditioning. So I watch Rick and Morty quite a lot. Now, Rick and Morty is it's an adult, it's quite a dark adult um, humor, dark humor adult cartoon. And the main character, Rick, he's like this narcissistic grandpa who comes to the family. And depending on how you look at this, but a lot of people kind of think he's the hero of the show, and he's like really cool. But the more you watch it, and I suppose the more you sort of consider these things, you realize how absolutely horrible he is. Like in the first season or so, the family is the family he goes back to is they're um, a relatively decent family. They're all kind of getting on pretty well. They're quite happy. And he goes back in, and slowly over a period of time, he destroys it. And eventually he gets his daughter and the husband to divorce. He completely abuses the boy, um, Morty, and just uses him to run on all his scientific experiments. And quite often he ends up getting seriously injured and killed and stuff. And it's kind of funny. And yeah, he gets killed because he can. There's multiple realities, and he can just pull in another one if he needs to, kind of thing. So Morty's not. He's very useful to him, but he's not that valuable to him. But the more you watch it, and then you have like Jerry, who's the father, who, you know, as you watch it, he's very pathetic and very weak, and they all abuse him and they all disrespect him. But at the beginning of the show, they kind of. I mean, I have to sort of really rewatch it. I've watched it hundreds of times, but at the beginning of the show, it just seems really good, and they're pretty respectful to the father, and they kind of love him and stuff. Um, and he's not a strong man, but he's a good man. But over the course of the show, he becomes more maligned and disrespected, and eventually the whole family ends up hating him and thinking he's absolutely pathetic. Now there are a few episodes where the reality changes, and he's actually left to his own devices, and he goes on to be like super cool. There's one where he's got to sort of save his wife from like sort of mutant monsters and things like that, and he turns into like a real badass. He seems to grow muscles and things like that, and he kills all the monsters and things and protects his wife. And then there's another one where everybody in his world, gets killed, and Rick and Morty leave, and he turns into a real badass, cool guy kind of thing. And Morty, the son, he goes back and sees him, and he realizes that the father was probably just never really given a chance to be that cool or badass. But yeah, that's kind of the show. Um, but if you're watching that, like it's if you're watching that and you've had sort of narcissistic patterns throughout your life, it's very familiar. It's very comforting, because you understand it, and it's funny. Like you see the humor in it, and it's almost validation without recognition. The show, without sort of saying this is the damage that narcissistic people cause, it's it glorifies it. But I don't think that's the point of it. I think that's the way it kind of gets past the censors and it gets allowed and stuff like that, and it becomes popular because most people aren't really aware of the damage that it causes. So if it was just like a documentary that was really bad, and if it made Jerry the husband, if it made him the hero, the show would kind of be quite boring. And people aren't really going to watch that because healthy, well-adjusted people, probably wouldn't watch this show anyway. So it kind of has to come across like that as dark humor. But the lesson obviously is like it glamorizes and humors the real dark and tragic message of it. Like you can watch that and laugh your ass off, and you can also watch it and cry your eyes out. If you actually sort of thought about what was actually happening. And it's a cartoon, so you can kind of forget about it. But so that's kind of like the show um, synopsis, if that's the word. So I might watch that. Just there's 9 seasons. I might just watch that back to back, and then I'll watch something else, some other movies or series or something. And it made me wonder if I'm kind of watching that through the night, if I'm falling asleep in 90 minutes of that, I am picking that up, and it's is it. So the thought was, is that reinforcing patterns? Is that reinforcing patterns that are inside of me? And should I stop watching it? Um, Maybe, but by watching it enough, I've also been able to see through the patterns because my experience of watching it over time has been different. At first, I just found it absolutely hilarious and I thought Rick was really cool. And then slowly over a period of time, I realized how absolutely horrible he is. Um, and I mean, I don't know how long the show's been on. It could be 5 or 10 years that I've been watching it over. And you start to realize how Jerry is actually the hero. He's actually the great guy in all this. And he tries desperately, desperately to save his family and his children. And he works really hard. But towards the end, even he becomes sort of disenfranchised and he kind of he doesn't adopt Rick's methods, but he almost kind of just gives up. So I think it got me thinking about the the patterns that the content we consume reinforce for us. And I was also like, I was kind of thinking about, it's the same with the movies. And, you know, is that by design? Are they designed to trap us in our patterns? Or do they simply play to where the market is? That many of us are trapped in our patterns so that a lot of these themed movies and stuff make sense, you know, because some of us imagine ourselves the hero in the story. So we get transfixed on these. To some of us want revenge and we watch revenge movies. You know, I've never really understood horror movies. I really hate them. They're like, I watched a couple that are pretty good, but I don't see the sense in horror for horror's sake. But some people love them and think they're hilarious. And it makes me wonder, have they faced such horror in their life that the only way they deal with it is by humor? But I'm no expert on that side of things. So over time, I've tried to deliberately change the content that I consume. I will, I've come off pretty much all social media. I think the only thing I really check in on is YouTube. But I find it quite informative. But I have in certain periods of my life been very just consumed. You can doom scroll in there for an hour or two, and I find if I've got some time to kill and nothing else to do, and I can't just sit and chill. It will kill a good hour or two. But I've been trying to make, well, I have made very conscious choices. I don't spend a lot of time on my phone anymore. And I really consciously choose which videos I'm watching. Try not to go down any crazy rabbit holes of what people think, because so what? That's what they think, and you can watch these things and just, you can almost believe them. People can portray a very um, convincing argument about any subject, but if you're not really a subject matter expert on it, you have no idea if what they're saying is true, and you can kind of just go off thinking that that's true. So I don't really tend to go off on any uh, wild goose chases on content anymore, and I'll carefully pick uh, people who I trust, who I know are authentic, who are trying to help, and I'll watch their content. And Also, like with movies, for example, I found some of my some movies that used to be my absolute favorite movies, like The Matrix and stuff like that. You'd think they're very like groundbreaking and trying to set you free, but the more you watch it, it's the complete opposite. There's nothing in that movie trying to set us free. It's the complete opposite. I like Mel Gibson movies, and he's a controversial character, isn't he? He got into a lot of trouble in the past and different things, and he's outcast from Hollywood, but he's still a big star making some really big movies. Um, what's that movie? Boss? Is it Boss Level? That's a pretty good movie. I like those. Those whole where like Groundhog Day is my favorite movie of all time. And Boss Level's kind of similar. He gets to wake up and repeat the day, and it's obviously a lot more graphic and of a different nature. Um, and there's another one I watched. I watched a great one recently. It was on, I think it was on Prime, Amazon Prime, and it was I forget the name of it, but he had a daughter, and they found an injured woman by the river or something. It's, his movies are so funny. It's always about like just this random average guy who gets into trouble. It's a bit like a Van Damme thing. It's a random average guy who gets into trouble, but he just randomly has this like incredible set of killing skills, and there's not often not even an explanation of why he has these things, and he's able to take out like whole platoons of mafiosa and stuff. But yeah, they're good. They're like good feel good movies, like we used to watch in the 80s and stuff, where they were just where the good guy won, and the right things happened. And that kind of thing is actually quite rare now. Like, does that happen in movies anymore where the good guy just wins and he gets the girl and stuff like that? So when I see those movies, I'll deliberately try and watch them. And some of them are really very good movies. You feel really good after them. But I think when I think about it, it's very obvious and it's very clear that the content you consume absolutely shapes your mind. You know, Maybe it reflects it, but I think it also shapes it as well. So I think you've got to be very careful with the content you consume. And I mean, isn't that what all these? I don't know. I mean, does TikTok just give us what we want, or does it shape society? I think it's got to be both. It gives us the dopamine release that we want, and you got to be aware of that. You got to be aware of that dopamine. It's extremely addictive. I was watching a video this morning about people love bombing people, women who love bombing, and if you're female, men who love bombing. What they do is they just flood your system with dopamine to such an extent that it just kind of rewires your brain. It's almost like they inject you with heroin or something. And your brain just very quickly rewires around that. So I was talking to a woman yesterday, and I kind of, I'd been chatting to her a little bit, and she kind of made it pretty obvious that she was very interested in me. But something was kind of holding me back, and I don't know, I kind of avoided her for a while, and then yesterday I thought I'll go and have a chat and just kind of see what it's about. And anyway, the short and tall of it was that she thought I was moving too slow and wanted me to move faster. I was like, I've got one pace and it's my pace, you know. And she was kind of like, well, that pace can kind of just pass me by. And I was like, awesome. That's perfect because there's not a chance I'm changing my pace for anybody. And to me, I think I could be wrong. Maybe I'm a dickhead. I could be wrong, but that kind of confirmed my hesitancy because she wanted to move fast and hot, as she said. But yeah, I'm not down for that. I'm not fucking. I'm not in my 20s anymore. I'm not interested in that kind of shit. I think you get to a certain age and you're looking for connection. That's why I come down here. I get a connection with these birds. I get a greater connection with these birds than I do most humans. I feel connected. I feel part of the pack just sat here, especially when they all kind of flock around me and sit to my left, my right, in front, and behind me. But not only the content we consume on the TV or whatever device, but the content you consume and the people that are around you. And I think you got to be careful of that. I mean, I just pretty much began completely retreating from everyone and everything a good year or so ago. And that was the greatest decision of my life. And I think I would rather be, I mean, I'm not, I speak to lots of people still, lots of people I like, but I would rather be completely alone than engage in any more bullshit or unhealthy conversations or relationships. I mean, what the hell? What does anybody get out of a bullshit relationship? You know, the people who do it, and I know why they do it. They're just wired that way. They can't do anything else. But I mean, their lives must be so devoid. I know mine was. My whole life was just so devoid of any reality and connection. And you have to imagine that depth and that connection. And you become what's called limerent. And you have to imagine depth to relationships where there is no depth. So yeah, the content that you consume in all forms, in in through your through your relationships, through your surroundings, through the TV or your phone, it all echoes and determines the quality of your life. It took me many, many years to see through like the Rick and Morty show and a lot of the movies that I would watch. Like a lot of the movies that I would just watch over and over and over, I can no longer bear to watch them anymore. Constantine was a great, great movie of mine. I just can't bear to watch it anymore. It's so dark. It's so awful. I almost feel like it introduces demonic elements into your life. And as well as the sort of Mel Gibson movies, I would quite often watch some of these just nice, like romantic comedies and stuff, and Christmas movies, and just feel good movies. And I'm sure they've got their dark overtones and political agendas and things that they're trying to push. I think the real answer to any of that is really just to go deep inside yourself. And I think all the answers are there. All the answers of who you truly are, of what you truly want, what you think is right and wrong, are all deep inside of you. You don't need anybody to tell you that. And they can differ wildly from other members of your family. Well, maybe they can. Maybe they're the same for all of us, but only some of us actually get in touch with them. But, you know, where anybody is in the particular state that they're in at any given stage of their life, then it does. It differs wildly for a lot of us. Some people are very happy just taking from others. Other people want to generate for themselves. And I think you have to work out which one you are. Because if you're a generator, then the takers, they want that energy. And it's very important for you to realize that and protect yourself from those people. And I suppose likewise, if you're a taker, you may be an unconscious taker. You probably have to realize that you're better off with givers than takers. I don't know. I don't understand the psychology enough. I certainly don't want to give them any advice to how to do what they do better. But, you know, their lives are their lives. And the thing is, what you find is, you know, people like that seem very powerful, but they're actually not. They're very, very weak and they have no power at all. We actually give them the power. We give them the permission to take from us. As soon as you take that power away, they become absolutely powerless. And you only have to kind of do this a few times where you take that power away from people and you realize all of a sudden these very confident, strong appearing people have zero confidence and strength. They rarely have the confidence to come and approach you or say hello. Some of the more stubborn ones kind of will, but if you just ignore them for a period of time, you get to the point where you'll just walk past them in the street and they'll barely even look your direction. You know, now if you initiate a conversation again, they'll light up and they'll draw you straight back in. But the encouraging thing is, if you can find the strength, these people have no power over you. They cannot enter your life at all. And I speak to a lot of people in these situations. I speak to a lot of women who are in these situations where they've had a lot of abusive family and partners and stuff, and they kind of, some of them go through it and come out the other side and go on to have great lives, and some of them are kind of stuck in the middle of it. And men as well who are still kind of in the midst of it. But it's rare that a man in the midst of it will really talk about it. It's only as he's kind of coming out of it or he's come out of it, that you'll really have that conversation. A man in the midst of it is so enwrapped that he won't really talk about it. Like, I see a lot of men, and I can see them with their partners, and they're sometimes big, strong men, but they're absolutely destroyed and under the thumb. And I wonder, I mean, I think back, I think we're just in complete denial, and we're trying to make the best of the situation. Whereas I think women are more likely to talk about it. They're more likely to talk about their sad situation, and maybe they'll talk to their friends about it and stuff. Um, but people aren't always able to sort of see their way out of a situation. And you can just tell them straight, like, oh, this is how I see your situation. This is what's happening. And if you've been through it, you can probably call it out pretty quickly and easily for somebody. But if it was that easy, then people just wouldn't be stuck in these dynamics in the first place. So you got to be very gentle when you're talking to people in those situations. You've got to be very compassionate. I was talking to a girl the other day, who I talked to, and she's having a real tough time. And she has been for a long time. And she was telling me some things, and I was just pointing out a few things, and I was saying to her, like, well, what do you think that means then if that person is doing that? And they were like, well, I don't know. And they continued to reel off more examples, you know, and, and they're trying to convince you that this person's bad. Whereas I can, within about 30 seconds of hearing what that person's done, I'm like, well, of course that person's bad, or they're treating you badly, or they have no respect or no care for you in that sort of kind of situation. So I think the best you can do for somebody is just point out that, well, that's a terrible action that that person is doing. And to me, like, I would never do that to a person. And that shows to me that that person does not care for you in that situation, you know, and maybe they'll hear that. And what I find it, there's another woman who I talked to who I've known her a long time. And me and her used to talk a lot when she was having trouble and I was having trouble. And she's kind of, I think she's coming through it now, you know. She's she's really she's on the right path, and I can see within a year or two she's gonna be somewhere. And I chat to her, and I sort of tell her how I like my life and where I'm at and how I've got to where I am. And you sometimes think people don't hear you, and you got to be careful not to push advice, not too much anyway. And if you do, just give little bits of advice, little practical steps, you know. So I was saying to this woman, I was saying that she needs to build build something, build a routine, and try and have a situation where she's having a little bit of spare energy, and she's creating a life where instead of all of her energy getting depleted, she's actually got a little bit of spare. And that spare she can put into positive things and growth that would just, gradually, slowly, consistently over a period of time would improve her life. And I saw her again, I don't know, a couple of days ago maybe. And she's looking great. She's looking really well. And I told her as much, and she was almost crying, which reflects the fact that nobody ever says nice things to her, or she's not used to it. And maybe her whole life, I don't know what her family situation was, but maybe she was never told anything good about herself. But she said um, she listened to what I said, and she started to implement this routine and stuff, and it was really helping her. You've got to be careful with people, not to be pulled into their life and their drama. But if you can help people along the way without it sort of negatively impacting you too much, I'll give up some of my time. I'll give up, if I bump into somebody once a month or something in town, I'll give them maybe up to half an hour of my time, and I'll listen a bit, and I'll give a little bit of advice. Now, if the person isn't listening, if that's of no use to them, and they're very, very stuck, then I will probably avoid them. Now, as much as I care that they improve, I'm not going to allow my life to be sort of negatively impacted. So I'll judge those situations very carefully. And you've got to be careful not to allow these people to become dependent on you. So I see people when I see them. If I bump into them, I'll have a chat. If I bump into them too frequently, I'm not going to have a chat every time I see them. And people have done that for me as well. Like, people have given me some key pieces of advice. And sometimes, and if somebody's been through it, they can say it in such a way that you know, it's true, but it takes you a long time to get there. Somebody just telling you the truth about a situation doesn't allow you to just immediately transform who you are, and it takes you time to absorb that message. I think as you get further along, you can then become intentional about something, and you can identify an area where you're struggling, or an area that requires work and improvement. And that's kind of what I do now. I think I've improved a lot of my life. So there's a small number of areas where I need some real work and improvement. And I'll be more intentional. I'll think about those, and I'll try to like progress them, not on a daily basis, but on an ongoing basis. Like I'll try something, and whether the result is positive or negative, I'll take a positive outcome from it, and learn from that. And so even going back to what I originally started talking about, like how content can shape your mind, it's taken me a long, long time to change the content that I consumed and the people that I interacted with. That's taken a long time. But what does it matter if something takes you 10 years if it has a fundamentally good shift on your life, you know, maybe some things will take you a week, something you're just missing, a little shift will take you a week. Maybe something else you realize is going to take you many years. There's things that I'm working on, which I've been sort of intentionally working on for 3 or 4 years now, and they're starting to come to fruition. And I know, unless I get a bit of a lucky break or something, I know that's still going to take me a year or two's work. And I think it through. I think through where I'm at, probably where I need to be at, and how am I going to get there. I think I think you can get there by listening, understanding, and then absorbing. Once you come to a new realization, you can't instantly shift to that new pattern. You have to sit with it for a period of time before you can become that thing. And that takes time. But you can also take a lot of other positive steps in the background as well. You can do lots of things that will gear you towards that change. And isn't it strange, because you are a thing, you are a personality, or a person trying to become another person, you know, and especially if that's coming from you, it's like, you know, it's like a it's like an it's like an iPhone trying to change its own operating system. Well, that's a tricky thing to do. An iPhone itself would never decide to change its operating system. So it makes me think, and well, I think it kind of reiterates what I said before, that if you go inside yourself, you will find who you truly are, and you will find what you truly want. So you've got to quieten yourself enough to listen to that voice, to hear who you are and what you want. So that's all I want to say about that for now. I like coming here and verbalizing my thoughts. You know, even if nobody else is really listening or cares about what I'm saying, it's useful for me. I seem to keep doing it. Normally, I would come here and just sit in silence with my thoughts. But is there something to verbalizing it and speaking to somebody else that makes you order, categorize even your thoughts? when we're stuck in our own heads, there's almost no audit system there. I mean, I think some of the great developments I've made have been in sort of real honest conversations with people, decent people who are trying to help. See the rat there must have swum from the other side. I love to see the birds land in the water. It's so beautiful. Come on, Senna. You coming? No. Yeah, I think I'm definitely sporting a different energy holding the camera than I used to. So I'm gonna order some of those glasses. Um, I don't like them being meta, so it means I've got to log into Facebook, which I n- hardly ever log into. You got to log into that, and then they changed like that policy in the UK lately. So unless you pay for it, they they can access all your data. I mean, I barely spend any time on my phone anyway, but it's just the principle of it, isn't it? And I don't know. I mean, if the glasses are connected to your phone's Wi-Fi or 5G, um, can they then access everything on your phone, like your shopping patterns and all that kind of stuff? And I mean, isn't that the point of Facebook to see what they can sell you? Um, doesn't matter. Can you just ignore those adverts? I don't know. Depends which way the world ultimately goes, isn't it? If it's going to be this whole dystopian society where they control every aspect of your life. I mean, control's a funny thing, isn't it? We're controlled in ways we don't even see. I mean, I try to avoid all control, and I do probably more than most at that. But there are probably, you know, there's probably control in my life that I don't even see yet. I think you could spend your entire life trying to be free of other people's control, and you probably wouldn't live long enough to do that. I think the only thing you could do is go live in the woods by yourself or with your family or something. Is control a bad thing if you don't realize it's happening? It may be. Like just simple things like, you know, medical advice and dietary advice and stuff like that. And, you know, we're told to eat 2,000, 2,500 calories a day and get your five veg a day and all this kind of stuff. And over time it changes. And, you know, at one time, everybody was told that smoking was very healthy for you. And now we're told it's like the worst thing you can do, And so I wanted to smoke cigars for a long time, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, I can't. I mean, I used to, and I was like, I can't. It's really bad. It's really bad. I shouldn't have, I'm a healthy person. I shouldn't do that, but I just really, really had this strong urge that I wanted to do it. And, so fuck it. One day I did. I bought a cigar again and it was fucking wonderful. So now I do. I smoke 2 or 3 cigars a day. I don't drink, I'm pretty healthy. I keep fit. And in the back of my mind, I've got that it's wrong. I'm going to get mouth cancer or something like that. But I love it. It's like one of my favorite things in the world. And like, who knows? Like nicotine is very good for you. You know, nicotine choline, I think can act as like almost a full replacement for acetylcholine. And your acetylcholine is it's like a transmitter. Is it like a neurotransmitter or something? But it's certainly it's it does it allow the nervous system to communicate. So if you're low on acetylcholine, your nerves and stuff aren't firing properly. Your different parts of your body aren't communicating effectively with each other. But if you smoke, you got a ton of um, nicotine choline there that can do that job for you. So there's some very good health benefits. Now, and if you're smoking good quality Colombian cigars or something like that, or, the good areas, you know, are there, there's probably not a lot else in there other than the tobacco leaf itself, and the wrapper and maybe the binders and stuff. Now, I'm guessing the tar or the smoke and the heat inside your mouth probably isn't the ideal situation, but you can be told that that's bad and maybe it's good. They tell us that we need so many calories and so many types of food, but yet the quality of food that they're actually selling is dire, you know. Now, I've been on a diet of milk and honey for I reckon about 6 months now. And before that, it was a very, very reduced diet anyway. So I reckon I'm getting about 400 to 500 calories a day. I've never looked better. I've never felt better. I'm very strong. Like in my exercises, I'm probably not the strongest I've ever been. Like I used to hit the gym and do like a lot of heavy resistance training, but I'm up there. You know, like I can do things in my I do a lot of yoga. I can do things in my yoga classes that a lot of people can't do, and my strength never fails me in the class. Not sure about my cardio. I'll probably need to do a bit of work on that. Um, I'm doing everything I want in my life. I've certainly entered a different state. I've definitely dropped into my parasympathetic. I'm a lot less running around. So I've definitely entered into a different metabolic state. But is that the point? You know, does 2,500 calories a day keep us in a heightened, more anxious, more easily controllable state? Is that sometimes the point of all of this advice? I mean, if you're trying to control a population, that's a pretty hard thing to do, you know. I mean, you could argue it's for our benefit, and if they just allowed us to run wild, would we start, stealing and killing each other and just living wild? Maybe. Would we reach an equilibrium like these guys? But there's still a lot of bad stuff happens amongst the ducks, but they live together. They kind of have a way of sorting it out. Could we do that? Could we live as a world, or would village invade village and stuff like that, you know? But I mean, don't we do that anyway? Don't we invade other countries and stuff? So are they just controlling the actions that we would do anyway? They're not changing anything, they're just controlling it. They're controlling who gets to do what. I don't know. But yeah, but for me that I mean, I thought when I was on this diet, and I'm not really on it through choice. Um, but I thought when I was on this diet, I thought I would waste away. I thought I'd be in serious trouble. And strangely enough, I've begun to thrive, and it's very surprising to me. Very surprising. Water, you know, they say, what is it now? They probably want us drinking 2 or 3 liters of water a day. Is that the bottled water industry lobbying to sell more water? Is it simply that? Is it commercial? But I barely drink any water anymore, and I think I'm by all accounts I'm probably pretty dehydrated. But yeah, I seem to be really thriving. You know, my body has adapted and adjusted. I mean, if I regularly drink a quarter a liter a day of water, I'd be very surprised. I mean, I might go a week without drinking any water. And obviously, I'm getting water in the milk, but I don't drink a lot of that either. Am I drinking a liter of milk a day, maybe? You know, 3 or 4 tablespoons of honey. I looked into it as well, and I think that is almost an all-encompassing diet. I get everything in there. Occasionally, I'll chuck in some uh, raw egg yolks, maybe every now and again, a little bit of bone broth. I think the only thing I may be missing is iodine, maybe zinc or something. I'm not sure, but occasionally I'll have a little bit of sea moss. But yeah, my system seems to be thriving on this diet. And you go back to like biblical times and stuff. I mean, I'm sure people weren't eating a varied diet. You know, a bit of meat, a bit of fish, a bit of vegetables. A bit of fruit. I'm sure that wasn't happening. And maybe you'll argue their lifespan was shorter. Maybe mine will be shorter. I'm not sure. But people keep saying to me how well I'm looking. I mean, if your physical appearance isn't a representation of your health, I'd be surprised. I'm not saying just if you look well, then you definitely are. Obviously, there can be hidden things going on, but I think my health has sort of has got worse over the years, and now. on this diet and with this lifestyle, on this diet of food and content, on this restrictive and intentional diet of food and content, certainly stabilizing and beginning to improve. I don't know which way it'll go, but the more I learn about things and the more I do the correct things, the better things seem to get. That was something I never understood. I never understood that just doing more of the correct things over a long period of time leads to better results. I was always of the thought that you know I, you, it, these one big things that you did or action, taking a lot of action. But sometimes inaction is more effective. Sometimes just sitting and thinking about your life and doing fewer things, working on a working on a single thing at a time or a few things, two or three things, you know, instead of trying to action your way out of problems in your life. Anyway, I think I've probably talked enough. I'm going to shut up now.